Fire Emblem is a series that's always been in my peripheral vision, so to speak. Besides the fact that they were represented in Smash, and that the game on 3DS saved the series, I really didn't know too much about it. But luckily, my friend was kind enough to hook me up with a copy of Three Houses, saying that I would probably like it if I just give it a chance. So with 60 hours of my life spent that I'll never get back, here's what I thought. And just a quick warning, I won't go into too much detail, but this video does contain some spoilers. Without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Kardino. For as many fans as the series has gained over the years, I feel like Fire Emblem is still a pretty niche franchise. And granted, when I say niche, I mean in context with Nintendo's other 10+ million sellers. I mean, besides the joke that they're overrepresented in Smash, and let's face it, they are, the series doesn't get too much attention in the mainstream Nintendo sphere. And I think this has led to a lot of people not trying a franchise they would probably like if they gave it a chance. Take me, for example. When I started the game, I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, yeah, I knew it was a turn-based strategy game, but from what I'd heard, things got complicated very quickly, especially when it came to optimizing your characters. And so I was glad when my friend offered to backseat my playthrough, with the only condition that I had to choose a specific route, which was fine by me. So now let's get into my playthrough. For the first few hours, my friend was on a call to show me the ropes and answer any questions I had. It was kind of funny to hear him audibly cringe whenever I did something dumb, but I was having a fun enough time. But then we got to the Monastery. Not gonna lie, this was the hardest part for me to get into. Here's something you need to understand. I hate having to navigate through a bunch of complicated menus. And although it was far from the worst I've seen, it was a bit annoying when a 3-page tutorial would appear every 5 minutes. Of course, I knew this was just the beginning and I'd get used to the UI soon enough, but still was a bit of a slog. What kept me going though were the battles themselves. For those of you who don't know, let me give you a brief primer on how combat works. If you've ever played any tabletop RPGs like D&D or Pathfinder, it's extremely similar. Each character is a different class, which determines their abilities and what enemies they'll be effective against. What determines this class is the different skills you train them in. And although some characters are inherently better at some things than others, they all start out as a default noble class, so there's a large amount of customizability. For example, I trained one of my students in flying and lance so that she could become a Pegasus Knight. This meant that she had a wide range of movement and could easily dodge attacks, although she had lower HP. Or with another one of my students, I made him a Dark Mage so he could do heavy damage from a distance, although he was weak to physical attacks. Add in different types of weapons and wearable items and you've got yourself a really meaty battle system that lets you pretty much create your own custom army. One person's playthrough is going to be a lot different from another's, not just for the story, but the way they battle. And the game can be punishing too. When starting the game, my friend had me play on casual mode with hard difficulty, and I'm glad he did. The entire thing felt like a fair challenge without me having to retry battles dozens of times. And since I wasn't playing on classic mode, permadeath wasn't enabled. Sure, this meant some story mode cutscenes were slightly less impactful, but it meant that I could play the way I wanted. See, I'm a pretty reckless person, so once I got the system down, I went headfirst into the fights, much to the pain of any observers. Like the time I unknowingly sent my Axeman into battle with a sword, then wondered why he was doing so poorly. But of course, fighting is only half the experience. As I mentioned before, the Monastery plays a significant role in the game. And once I got past the tutorials, I found it almost as engaging as combat. Here you'll take on the role of a professor and teach your students the required skills for a desired class. And on Sundays, you're free to do whatever you think most advantageous. You can explore the monastery, take a seminar, head into expeditionary battles to gain experience, or simply rest. Resting will increase morale, along with a few other things later in the game. Battles are self-explanatory, and seminars hone specific skills with a select number of students. Exploring the monastery lets you engage with students or partake in monthly activities. You can even recruit students from other classes, and I recommend you focus a lot harder on doing so than I did. I mean, by the time I got to the time skip, I'd only recruited a handful, which made things quite a bit harder than they could have been. In general, I love the way the game is structured. Each month is a race to further refine your team's skills before the story advances. Of course, I'm only scraping the surface here, but that's the gist of what you need to know, and I don't want this explanation to become too long or boring. Heck, it took me a long time to even fully get it. A decent way in, I was telling my friend how hard the battles were getting, not realizing that it was because I was doing seminars every other week instead of training in actual battles. Anyway, putting my stupidity aside, by the end of the first day, I conclude that it was going to be a fun experience. That being said, I felt like it wouldn't be something I'd binge over the next few days or anything. Guess what happened? I found that month all I wanted to do was play Fire Emblem, and I'd say I'll just play for about half an hour or so, and the next thing I knew, it had been an entire afternoon. But needless to say, this game got me hook, line, and sinker, and I'm really glad it did. It's been a while since the game's got me this immersed. If arcade-style games like Monkey Ball are the candies you can just shovel in your mouth and never stop eating, Fire Emblem is a giant steak that offers a great experience to sink your teeth into. I spent way too many nights staying up late because I lost track of time, and let me assure you, my sleep schedule took a pretty serious hit. So anyway, on to the story. Although this game does follow a single story at first, it soon splits off into 4 separate routes based on what choices you make, especially what house you choose. And the neat thing about the story is each route tells a similar tale from a different perspective, and thus who the protagonists and antagonists are change too. For example, my friend had me choose the Black Eagles, so the goal of the game was to unify the nation under a single hierarchy. However, I know that when I get into the New Game Plus as the Blue Lions, I'm probably going to look at the people I fought with earlier in a completely different light. I love stories where the answer isn't black and white. I know games where choices matter have become pretty popular, but this one feels like there really is no completely justified answer. Especially after the time skip, the world becomes much less cheerful as war hangs over the nation and killing people you once knew becomes way too common. And you really do ask yourself if this is the right thing you're fighting for. Not to mention the cutscenes are really well done. Apparently my route was the one with the least of them, but I love how in some cutscenes they show a mural being drawn and painted, or at other times it shows your progress on a map of the nation. And also, the narrator is way too satisfying to listen to.
The icy winds of the Agma Mountains have begun to scatter, and the verdant fields once again spring to life across Fodlan, heralding the start of a new year. As they celebrate the dawning year, the people pray that they may realize their full potential, just as a tiny sprout hopes to one day grow into a great tree.
Now, the last thing I want to bring up is the presentation. I know that even if it's become increasingly popular, not everyone is into anime. It carries with it a certain stigma that I feel a lot of people connect Fire Emblem with, especially with the whole petting girls thing from the previous entries. But as a person who only recently got into anime myself, I'm here to tell you that there's none of that weird stuff here. In fact, I find the presentation to be really well done, not only for the visuals, but everything. I mean, for me, music is as much a factor as visuals, and there are quite a few bangers here. I'm not gonna add the soundtrack to my phone or anything, but Fodlan Winds will never fail to get me pumped. The dialogue is well written too. Returning to my ignorance, whenever I brought up the menu, I'd see this support option that I ignored since I thought it was just a manual or something. But about halfway through, I found out that these were actually side stories that strengthen the characters' relationships. They offer deeper insight into the characters, and by the end, none of them feel underdeveloped. Obviously, I can't tell you too much, but just trust me on this. It got to the point where every couple in-game weeks, I'd be sure to always check if there were any support conversations to see. And if you hate reading like me, don't worry, every line in the game is voice acted. The one thing I was a bit hesitant about was at the end of the game, it is possible to date your former students, which might be a bit close to the line for some. But again, it's optional and the game pulls it off pretty well. So in the end, what were my final thoughts on Fire Emblem Three Houses? Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. It always feels like there's more I can experience, and even when my friend joined me for the final battle, he was still cringing when he discovered there were several optimizations I hadn't even realized I could do. Already I feel that itch to play the game again on a different route, this time using all my knowledge from the first round to improve my game further. If you like strategy games but haven't taken the plunge on the Fire Emblem series, I'd say go for it, especially if you can find it for a discount. One playthrough took me 60 hours and I'm still ready for more. I won't jump into the next one right away, but you could definitely say this game made me a believer. But anyway, have you thought about trying Three Houses? Or maybe there's some other game you're interested in trying. With both this and Super Metroid under my belt, I'm feeling adventurous and ready to try some new stuff. Who knows what I'll try next? But anyway, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.